Mr. Donald Taylor, a man whose tailor-made suit cost more than the average American's monthly mortgage payment, spat the words out with icy contempt. It was 9:15 p.m. on a crisp November evening in downtown Seattle. Taylor sat ensconced on the lavish cedar-decked patio of the Rainier View Club, the city lights shimmering below. Framed by the expensive glow of propane tower heaters, he was immobilized, trapped in a state of sudden, blinding pain. Slumped dramatically in a wicker chair that was meant to convey casual elegance but now looked like a velvet torture device, 8 prominent tech investors and lawyers, gathered to celebrate Taylor's latest billion-dollar merger, watched with nervous discomfort as champagne flutes were tentatively lowered. 40 feet away, beyond the ornamental iron railing that separated the club's pristine world from the harsh reality of the street, stood David Miller. He was 19 years old, his uniformer discarded Seattle Fire department training jacket several sizes too large, was stained with dirt and grease from a grueling 12-hour shift at a local homeless shelter kitchen where he volunteered. He was not dirty, nor was he a thief, but he was undeniably out of place. His hands were calloused, and his face, smudged beneath tired eyes, carried the weight of a life lived on the margins. "Sir, please." David's voice was low, carrying a desperate clarity that cut through the uncomfortable silence. "I can help you." Taylor, a man accustomed to buying solutions, not receiving them from the overlooked, managed a strained, derisive laugh. "Help me? How long would your help take?" "Boy," David's voice shook, his gaze fixed on the unnatural tension visible in Taylor's upper chest and shoulder. "The protocol, ... It's fast. 30 seconds, maybe 40. Laughter, weak and scattered, rippled through the exclusive gathering. Taylor, fighting a fresh wave of agony that threatened to buckle him, pulled out his platinum fountain pen and a slip of paper from an inner pocket.
"Perfect.
I'm having an episode that my personal physician would charge $5,000 just to see. You want to play medic? Fine. Save me for $1 million. Street rat, and you get a check." David's jaw tightened. He whispered. 35 minutes earlier, 8:40 p.m., David Miller had walked 5 miles from the temporary shelter near Pioneer Square, his worn boots pounding the pavement, the perpetual Seattle mist clinging to him. He wasn't walking to the club. He was walking to the Seattle Central Library, where he intended to spend the last available hour reading. David wasn't just working. He was studying. His goal, to pass the rigorous written and physical exam for the next fire department recruitment cycle. He needed to be a firefighter notch. Just for the career, but for the definitive, non-negotiable proof that he was capable, that he was someone who could save others. Something the system had failed to be for him. He and his younger sister, Lisa Hernandez, had been separated in the foster care system 2 years prior, a direct result of bureaucratic apathy and insufficient resources. He carried the weight of that failure every day. The Rainier View Club, a sprawling monument to inaccessible wealth, loomed above the city, its architecture a stark contrast to the crumbling, rain-soaked public spaces David inhabited. He walked past its refuse area, searching for a usable cardboard to insulate his boots when he felt the cold seeping through. Instead of cardboard, he found a treasure, a discarded DAMP, Pocket Guide to Advanced Cardiac Life Support, ACL's 2024 edition. Its laminated cover peeled back from water damage. Someone from the club, a doctor, perhaps, or a visiting emergency responder, had tossed it out. David smoothed the pages on a recycling bin, reading under the dim glow of the club's exterior light. He didn't just read, he absorbed. His mind, honed by years of surviving on wits and memory, acted like a sponge. He had what was clinically described as hyperthymesian ability to recall nearly every moment, every piece of information he had ever encountered. The memory of his mother's frantic 911 call, the apartment number, the exact time the paramedics finally arrived after it was too late was all there, permanently etched. The ACLS guide was now added to his mental library, an ever-growing collection of survival knowledge. He focused on the chapter dedicated to atypical acute presentations. Specifically, the section on acute myocardial infarction, mimics, and musculoskeletal emergencies presenting as cardiac distress. He found the page that dealt with severe, often secondary to chronic posture strain, resulting in neurovascular bundle compression. Key finding: pain remains reproducible with movement or palpation. Unlike true myastris, the exact location, the required pressure, The time from all of it was etched into his brain in an instant. David felt a surge of cold certainty. He knew this one. It was a common misdiagnosis in emergency rooms. On the patio, the celebration abruptly fractured. Dental Taylor, attempting to raise a glass of extremely rare vintage Chardonnay, had gasped. His fork clattered against the imported china. Asked his lawyer, Barbara Brown, a woman whose concern was tightly wrapped in professional composure. Taylor's face, usually flushed with the confidence of wealth, was sheeted. His left arm flew to his chest, gripping his shoulder, his breathing instantly shallow and ragged. My chest, ... my arm, ... I can't move it. It feels ... compressed. Chaos erupted. A junior investor, Richie Davies, was already on his phone. Emergency. The Rainier View Club. Route 99, we need an ambulance. 55-year-old male. Possible heart attack. He listened for a moment, his face falling. 18 minutes minimum. David, watching from the alleyway, saw everything. The way Taylor was gripping his shoulder, not his heart. The reproducible, agonizing grimace when he tried to move his arm. The tension visible even through the silk of his shirt, a knot of muscle pulling his clavicle slightly forward. Not a heart attack. Not a cardiac event. Acute pectoralis minor syndrome, a vicious, painful compression of the brachial plexus and subclavian artery, often triggered by stress or sudden movement. It looked, felt, and terrified like a coronary catastrophe, but it was a mechanical, fixable crisis. Fixable in seconds. The memory of his sister Lisa's face, the last time he'd seen her, flashed through his mind. She had needed help immediately, but the world had made her wait. Taylor was going to wait 80 minutes, suffering unnecessary agony that could worsen the compression. David stepped out of the shadows, approaching the ornamental fence. His presence, a 19-year-old in a stained uniform, was an immediate siren call for outrage. Richard Davis noticed him first. Security. There's a vagrant here. Taylor's head snapped up, his eyes meeting David's. In that instant, a wealthy man at the peak of fear and a young man at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder locked gazes. Then the fear in Taylor's eyes twisted into the ugliness of reflexive prejudice. David ignored the slur, focusing on the pain in Taylor's breathing. Sir, please, you are suffering from a neurovascular compression, not a coronary event. It is pectoralis minor syndrome. Your muscle is crushing the nerve bundle in your shoulder. Taylor's laugh was a dry, choking sound. You, a kid who looks like he just crawled out of a storm drain. The security guard, a large, impassive man named Gary Allen, was already moving toward David. David knew he had only seconds before the situation became physical. He had to state his case with unassailable authority. He reached into his jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but for the only proof he carried. A worn plastic ID wristband, faded with use, his sister's name and hospital ID, faintly visible Lisa Aaron. Dob, 4 October, tal 2012, admitted the 1st of September 2023. Asterisk, he didn't pull it out entirely, letting it act as a talisman. He looked Taylor directly in the eye. It's a common misdiagnosis. It looks like dying. It feels like the end. David then gave his final, desperate offer, the one that would either save him or damn him. He reiterated the protocol and the $1 million stakes facing the assembled wealth with nothing but knowledge and conviction. Taylor's smile was vicious. Go on. Then you have your seconds. Let's see what a high school dropout knows that my team of specialists missed. When you fail, the police take you. Your life gets infinitely worse. David didn't hesitate. He looked past the arrogance, past the $1 million check, and saw only the pain, the unnecessary, prolonging pain that mirrored his sister's final hours. Yes, sir. Gary Allen, the security guard, reached David just as he climbed through the railing. David knew the guard wouldn't touch him yet. Taylor was enjoying the spectacle too much. He moved toward the horrified millionaire, his small, thin frame trembling with nerves, but guided by surgical precision. David was ready to enact the protocol he'd memorized just an hour before. The fate of Donald Taylor's pain and David Miller's future hinged on the next 40 seconds. The air on the patio of the Rainier View Club, already cold, seemed to drop another 10 degrees. David, barely tall enough to reach the seat at Donald Taylor's shoulder, comfortably knelt by the man's side. The security guard, Gary Allen, his hand hovering over David's shoulder, looked to Taylor for a command that was slow in coming. "Mr. Taylor, this is highly unorthodox. I must insist we wait for the paramedics." Barbara Brown, the sharp-featured corporate lawyer, asserted, her voice tight with professional risk assessment. Taylor, however, was past logic. His face was a mask of suffering, the kind of absolute, unbearable pain that strips a person of their veneer. He had the best insurance, the best doctors, but here, now, in this moment of acute helplessness, none of it mattered. Only the promise of immediate cessation, offered by the person he had just scorned, held any appeal. "Quiet, Barbara," Taylor grated out, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chilly air. "Let him try. I want to see the failure. And if he succeeds, well, I will pay." David ignored the escalating tension. He reached into the deep pocket of his borrowed jacket and pulled out a small, worn piece of hotel soap he saved from the Schultes surrogate for a sterile wipe and rubbed his hands together vigorously, a silent but deliberate act of professionalism. "I need to find the precise location." "Sir?" David's voice was steady now, devoid of the earlier tremor. "It's going to hurt the moment I touch the trigger point. I need you to stay completely still and breathe shallowly." Taylor nodded, incapable of anything more. David began to palpate the shoulder and chest, his fingers rough from manual labor, but trained by observation endless hours spent watching physical therapists and paramedics in public parks. Studying anatomical diagrams he'd found taped to abandoned construction sites moved with an astonishing, quiet confidence. He felt the tense, knotted cord of the pectoralis minor, tracing its origin from the ribs to its insertion on the coracoid process. A muscular vice currently crushing the delicate nerve bundle. "Right here," he whispered, a final confirmation to himself. Richard Davies, who had initially been calling 911, now held his phone steady, recording everything, the blue light reflecting in David's focused eyes. Richard asked, his tone shifting from contempt to fear for Taylor. David looked up, his expression a fleeting mixture of fear and conviction. "My sister, Lisa Hernandez. She was 7. She died of a preventable respiratory infection in a county hospital waiting room. We waited for 6 hours for a doctor to see her, all because the system prioritized people with better insurance or more convincing symptoms. I learned every medical protocol I could find so that no one I see suffers or waits unnecessarily. I know this is pectoralis minor syndrome. I know the protocol. I know the timeline." The raw, painful truth of his motivation hung heavy in the opulent air, silencing every nervous laugh and professional objection. "All right, kid, do it," Taylor commanded, his breath catching. "If you're so smart, prove it." David didn't flinch at the threat. When I pressed, everyone count out loud, 240. At 9:22 p.m. and 15 seconds, David applied the force. He used the entire weight of his body, leaning in with focused, sustained pressure. 18 pounds per square inch, perhaps more, driving his thumbs deep into the thick, rigid muscle fibers. Taylor's gasp was immediate, a high, ragged cry that was cut short. He bellowed. Richard Davis joined in. 2, 3. The other guests, horrified but mesmerized, added their voices to the rising collective countdown. David's arms shook violently, his muscles burning from the sustained exertion. The pain on Taylor's face was agonizing, a crimson flush spreading across his neck and jaw. Taylor tried to pull away, but David's grip was locked. "Don't fight it, sir," David urged through gritted teeth. 7, 8, 9. The sound was deafening. The only other noise was Taylor's shallow, ragged breathing, punctuated by small, desperate moans. David could feel the muscle beneath his thumbs dense, unyielding, like pressing granite. He remembered the ACL's guide's instruction. Asterisk duration, 30 to 45 seconds. Asterisk. He pushed harder, ignoring the fiery ache in his own body. 17, 18, 19. The counting became frantic, the crowd now invested in the impossible spectacle. At 28, David felt it. Not a subtle shift, but a distinct, deep asterisk. Thwomp asterisk. Sound like a rubber band snapping or a knot untying inside the tissue. The hard muscle beneath his thumbs suddenly melted, going from solid rock to something soft, pliable, and loose. Taylor's spine arched, his head snapping back, a choked sound of utter relief tearing from his throat. David immediately pulled his thumbs away. The total time elapsed 29 seconds. The crowd stopped counting, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Taylor slowly lowered his left arm. He flexed his fingers, then his wrist, then cautiously rotated his shoulder. The acute, blinding agony of pain that had convinced a multimillionaire he was dying was simply gone. The pain, Taylor whispered, tears of shock and relief welling in his eyes. It's completely gone. I can move it. The patio erupted in a roar of shock. People were shouting, chairs were scraping, and every phone was being raised higher, capturing Taylor slowly rising from his chair, testing his arm, flexing his shoulder, the picture of perfect, pain-free mobility. He turned to David, who was still kneeling. His small body trembling from the physical effort, Donald Taylor dropped to his knees, not in supplication, but to meet David eye to eye, equality established by shared experience and undeniable truth. His usual cold composure had shattered, replaced by raw emotion. You're 19, Taylor choked out the number, a statement of disbelief. 19, and you just did what every specialist on my contact list couldn't even diagnose. You saved me from an unnecessary panic attack and 18 minutes of torture. He pulled David into a fierce, desperate hug, a gesture utterly alien to the corporate titan. David Overwald could only grip his own sister's hospital band, still clutched in his hand. Barbara Brown, the skeptical lawyer, slowly lowered her phone. She was watching her client, the unassailable Donald Taylor, sob openly while hugging a homeless youth. She was a professional, trained to handle contingencies and crises, but this defied every contingency plan. The story, caught on dozens of high-definition cameras, was already exploding. Richard Davies, pale with excitement, checked his phone. Mr. Taylor, sir, the video. It's at 700,000 views in 4 minutes. The hashtag number 30 seconds save is trending nationally. The reality of the viral moment was crashing over the scene. Taylor, regaining his composure, looked at the check he had written, but David didn't move. He stared at the check, then at the man. I didn't do it for the money, sir, David said, his voice quiet but steady, echoing his earlier declaration. The air stilled again. It was a rejection of the only currency Taylor understood, a moral indictment wrapped in a gesture of pure altruism. Taylor asked, baffled. David began to speak of his desire to join the fire department, to pass the exam, to learn medicine, officially asterisk, so he could save the people no one else saw. Before David could finish, another guest, Dr. Thomas Rodriguez, a retired trauma surgeon and one of Taylor's investors, who had watched the entire procedure with increasing awe, stepped forward. He had been quietly observing David's technique. Mr. Taylor, I recognize that clinical precision, that's not textbook knowledge alone. That is pure intuition. But David, Dr. Rodriguez turned to the young man. I have a puzzle for your prodigious memory and intuition. He addressed David with a deep, professional respect. 2 years ago, I suffered a massive laceration to my forearm while sailing, repaired surgically, perfectly. But since then, I have chronic, debilitating numbness in my index and middle fingers. For specialists, 2 nerve conduction. Dr. Rodriguez held out his hand. David, exhausted but energized by the new challenge, stepped forward. He asked questions about the original injury's location, the type of sutures used, and the precise moment the numbness began. He took Dr. Rodriguez's hand and began to palpate the forearm, tracing the path of the median nerve. His movements were slow, focused, tracing the scar line. He paused, his finger pressing lightly near the wrist, the carpal tunnel too obvious. He moved further up, near the surgical repair, following the scar. Then his finger stopped, pressing gently on a tiny, almost invisible area of scar tissue, hardened beneath the skin, 2 inches above the wrist crease. Here, David said, his voice barely audible. A secondary not the main nerve, but the palmar cutaneous branch of the median nerve, caught in scar tissue from the original repair. It's superficial. It causes the sensory loss, but is too minor to flag a major conduction study. Dr. Rodriguez stared, then pressed his own thumb into the spot David indicated. A jolt of familiar pinprick numbness shot into his fingers. Dear God, the old surgeon breathed, a profound look of scientific wonder on his face. He's right, a tiny tethering of a superficial branch. He's absolutely right. The crowd watched, stunned into silence again. David, the self-taught medic, had just diagnosed two separate, complex, misdiagnosed conditions in the space of 10 minutes. The second diagnosis was the turning point. For Taylor, the physical pain had been the shock. For the rest of the professional elites, the failure of their own asterisk system, the one that had ignored David, was the deeper realization. Donald Taylor put away the $1 million check. He knew David didn't want money. He wanted access. He wanted the chance his sister never had. Taylor pulled out his phone, his mind already spinning into a new, complex deal, a future David Miller could never have bought. Dr. Rodriguez, Taylor said, his voice firm. David Vance needs to be on your team tomorrow. Observe, learn, train. Officially, get him cleared. He began making calls, the sheer force of his wealth now dedicated not to accumulation, but to rescue and restitution. David, watching the sheer power of Taylor's world, the immediate, uncompromising access, knew that his life had changed, not because of a reward, but because he had forced the powerful to listen to the powerless. The injustice that killed his sister was the injustice he was now weaponizing against the system that perpetrated it. The sheer force of Donald Taylor's pivot from cynical millionaire to zealous patron of David Miller was breathtaking. He had torn the $1 million check into quarters, letting the expensive paper confetti flutter onto the patio. "Money's temporary," David Taylor declared, his voice ringing with a conviction born of both near-death terror and profound emotional revelation. "What you need is permanence." It was 9:45 p.m. Taylor pulled out his phone again, dictating a flurry of high-stakes, life-altering commands. The assembled elite, the lawyers, the investors, the retired surgeon stood mesmerized, watching the immediate, uncompromising application of wealth as an instrument of restitution. The first call was to the headmaster of the prestigious Academy of the Cascade Foothills, a private institution known for its rigorous science track. "Michael, it's Donald Taylor. I'm enrolling a new student immediately. David Miller, age 19. Yes, I'm entirely serious. He is a phenomenal mind, a photographic genius, and he just saved my life. Full scholarship, all expenses, through to medical school and residency. I'm funding a new trust. Monday morning, 8 a.m. I'll bring him personally." He hung up before the stunned headmaster, Mikhail Brown, could respond. The second call was to a real estate manager. "Betty, I need unit for C at the Union Square Towers, fully prepped by midnight tonight. I know it's late. Triple the fee. Fully furnished. New everything. A kitchen stocked with fresh, quality, food not canned goods. Clothes, a wardrobe that fits a young man of 19, various sizes. Get the best mattress you can find. It needs to be a home, Betty. Not just an apartment. A true, safe, warm sanctuary. He's been sleeping rough for a year and a half. I want him to walk into stability